Good evening, Hyperspinners. Today we're going to be talking about NesicaLive and Sega Ridgewing, so get ready. Yeah, so what this TechnoParrot is all about is it's essentially a UI for launching Taito Type X games. You're going to see that if you've already got Taito Type X games set up, that a lot of these games are things that you've already seen before. So I just want to put a word of caution there. Also, I want to throw out there that if you guys are just starting your Hyperspin setup, I would say Taito Type X games, as well as your Sega, what are we calling it? The Ring Edge and NesicaXLive. All of these are essentially Taito Type X games, which are sort of these copies of arcade games, and they're essentially PC games that we're going to be launching. And that's really the best way that I've found to launch these games. NesicaXLive is very similar to this TechnoParrot. It's basically a front end, like a fan-made front end, and it's basically just a launcher. So if you guys are running Hyperspin, you guys already have a front end, and it's, to be honest, in my opinion, it's a lot prettier, and there isn't an auto hotkey that will basically support, launching this, an extra front end to actually launch these games. So what I'm going to recommend is setting these games up as PC games, which I will show you guys how to do that. If you haven't seen my video on launching PC games, definitely check that out. It's going to have the same look and feel. But just to kind of talk through this TechnoParrot, basically there's a game launcher here. We're not going to be launching this front end, but I just wanted to kind of show you the games here that are on that. And, you got to find those games, and, that would launch correctly from here if you had those. But there you go. So that's the list that TechnoParrot supports. But again, if you just launch these as PC games, you're going to be good to go. So we've got start button, game settings, and emulation settings. Basically what I attempted to do is, I tried to use this front end, but then ultimately I found that it just doesn't jive with Hyperspin very well. So in my opinion, what I wanted to accomplish was, within Hyperspin, I want a way to launch the game without, having to deal with, extra layers here. So the PC launching of the game is going to do just that. But to kind of finish things off here, this game settings, basically I can click input mapping, type in all my mapping for a specific game or just in general, and and emulation settings, same sort of thing. It just allows you to enable different features. But since we're not going to be using this TechnoParrot emulator, or front end is probably more appropriate than calling it, we're going to just go ahead and close that out. So what you're going to want to do is, if you are wanting to make a dedicated wheel for, let's say, Sega Ridge, you would basically create a wheel called Sega Ridge under Main Menu Wizard, and you'd hit the plus sign there and type the name of your system, and then say that you want a sub wheel. It'll congratulate you, and then you'll be able to go to the wheel settings here and type or select Taito Type X or Sega Ridge, whatever you ended up choosing. Also a NesicaXLive, if you wanted a dedicated NesicaXLive, you could also do that. But for my setup, I've got it all under Taito Type X games because, one, they're all basically the same to me. They're sort of a pain to set up, and outside of that, they all have the same look and feel to me. So that's why I put them all under Taito Type X, and I think that's appropriate. I don't think I'm mixing things around. by doing that. So what you're going to do is go to the emulators tab. You're going to select the executable to PC Launcher XE, which if you haven't seen my PC Launcher game video, definitely check that out. I've also got the file on my FTP as well as my mega site, so check out the description below. Next we've got in the wheel tab, just my default alpha is 0.15, and navigation themes, basically I want wheels only. I've got animation out on themes, reload backgrounds, and we're gonna keep on moving here. Try to keep this as short as possible. And special art, so that's all the defaults for me. Remember, I like the genre art in the top right corner. I like sort of the frame look at the bottom and the top. I've got all that loaded up on my FTP site on emumovies, so definitely check that out if you haven't already on a prior video. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out because we've essentially set up the folder structure for Taito Type X slash Sega whatever and NesicaXLive. So everything's going to be just baked in under that folder there. So next we're going to go to databases, and we're going to go to Taito Type X. And remember, we've got a number of duplicates happening here, you know, if we're using all three of these wheels, so just kind of keep that in mind. So I've got everything lumped in under Taito Type X, and if you were to add a specific game, you know, you could just add it to the bottom of that XML. So Let's Go Island, Operation Ghost, those are sort of light gun games, if you will. Those are pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and we're going to start getting to business here. So what we're going to do is go to RocketLauncher, and you should see a Taito Type X I guess system here. Please note that what we're going to be talking about does talk about the gamut of Taito Type X, but Taito Type X games specifically have a slightly different setup. The only reason I say that is because the Taito Type X games, the actual ones, have a way to remap the controls pretty quickly. It's an XE itself, but the majority of the light gun games and such, those are already set up by default for the light gun, so there's really no reason to remap those. What I might do is I might just drop in some of the folders that would allow you to basically remap those game controls. So I'm talking like the XB config, XB loader. These are essentially going to allow you to, or the pad config, they're essentially going to allow you to remap your things very quickly. So you can see I click on the pad config, and it's got everything here that you could change, but we're going to get in the thick of things here. Essentially, each one of these games could be its own tutorial because it is just that sticky. But long story short, all we've got to do though is find the game, drop it in the folder, and basically just remap the controls. And each one of these games are going to be a different setup here, like in terms of remapping the controls. So for the most part though, you could use the same exe file here, so I will try to drop some of these game configs in the FTP on emumovies, so you can use that as an example and just drop those files in each one of your games accordingly. So what we're going to do is just keep on moving here and just try to get some of these games to launch. And what we're going to do is go to Type X System, and we're going to select PC Launcher. And to do that, you're going to go down to the bottom here, and you're going to click on the plus sign, and this is what will show up. And you'll type in the module path, and you'll put in the name. So I've already named it here, so that's why I can't rename it. But you'll put in PC Launcher or whatever you want to call it. You can call it NesicaXLive if you want, and put in the module PC Launcher auto hotkey. you're going to click X to save that, and then you're going to click the magnifying glass up at the top, the default emulator. You're going to select PC Launcher. So you've got that bit set up. We're going to go to the Modules tab, and you're going to select PC Launcher now. It should show up there. If it doesn't, push the little arrow refresh button. But we're going to select the Edit Global Module Settings, this little red paper header icon. And what you're going to find is this is probably going to be blank for you initially because you haven't set up the PC games yet. So what you're going to do is push the plus sign, and then any of the games that are in your database folder for Taito Type X will basically populate there. And once you select from that pop-up that just was up there by pushing this plus sign, you're going to see the window below here as blank. And when you click on the game, you'll just want to basically select the application. It's going to be an exe file. It's going to be, chances are, a launcher.exe. And yeah, and what you'll want to do is also, you can see the app wait X. Basically, there are some games that you'll want to wait for that to show up. And basically what this is doing is it's just trying to keep your game in focus. As you can see here, when you hover over the eye, it's basically just waiting for like a splash screen to close. So some of these games require a bat file to launch, so that is why some of these games have that. And the Taito Type X setup, again, could be a tutorial in itself. But like Haunted Museum, we don't need it here. There was no bat file, so we just launched the exe all by itself. In terms of pre and post launch, there's nothing to set up, so it's literally just taking the application that is in there, the exe file, and launching it. So that's all there is to it, guys. It's a lot easier said than done. Well, let's be real here. It's not terribly difficult, but it is, you know, it can bring some headaches just to kind of get things going here. So I do see something here that's interesting. The Let's Go Island. This is launching the TechnoParrot UI, but here is where it gets a little fun for you guys maybe. So what we can do here is, if you guys set up TechnoParrot and you want to basically use this front end, basically, you can essentially launch this using parameters where the game actually doesn't like populate in in that TechnoParrot UI. Basically, what this parameters section does is it says, look at the application of TechnoParrot UI. You could path that, and that would basically launch that UI that we had open at the beginning of the video. But with the parameters, this is the only way really around using that front end here, and that is using the parameters --profile equals LGL .xml. That's essentially the here, let's go ahead and open this up here. That's essentially the way that this thing can be launched. So what are we looking for? Let's go Island. So within the files themselves, basically what we've got here is here, let's see, LGL XML here. So I believe that's it. Here, I'm kind of skimming here, guys. So we're going to look at the INI. Yeah, that looks good. I'm pretty sure it's in here. Let's see. Interesting. So I've got to think back where this was at, but it definitely does launch. Let's go Island. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. And it's probably biting me right in the face here, guys. So what I'll do is I'll also include maybe a link in the description below of all of these parameters that will help you guys. This actually might be a command that's actually in the TechnoParrot emulator. So I don't want to waste too much of your guys' time here doing this, looking around here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, here it is. Here it is. Yes. All right, so what I'm getting excited about here is under your TechnoParrot folder, under Game Profiles, this is going to be where all the names of your XMLs are for TechnoParrot. So if you want to use the TechnoParrot basically front end, you'll never actually see that front end because you're using the parameters, but these are the parameters that you're going to be putting in here. So if you were wanting to launch this Chase HQ2 game, what you're going to have is the parameters are going to be -- profile equals whichever one that I just said, the Chase HQ2.xml. So that's going to allow you to basically launch the game right off the bat, and it's going to have the same feel if you just select the exe for your game. So if you don't want to use this TechnoParrot UI stuff, just put in the exe for your PC game, and you don't have to worry about all this parameter stuff. The one advantage that you do have if you use TechnoParrot is, here, I'll pull it back up here. What you can do is set up the controls maybe a little quicker. So if we go to Let's Go Islands and we go to Game Settings, go to Input, you could essentially select each one of your inputs and use Save Settings. But for what it's worth, these games are already essentially set up. You can just change your configurations if needed. If you do use the TechnoParrot UI, what you're going to want to do is have the exit method of Alt F4, and there's nothing else that we need to do here. So I'm kind of showing you a number of ways to launch these games, whether it be through TechnoParrot UI or just launching a PC game, but that's essentially it, guys. So if you're using NesicaXLive, same sort of gig. If you want to use the front end for NesicaXLive, then what you'll do is just launch the app itself, because it is a front end itself. And I'm sure you could have parameters just like this, but I ultimately had no use, to add that front end to my system. I just launch these things as exes. PC games essentially. So I hope that I'm not too long-winded here, but that is what we're completing here, and that is getting the job done. When we are looking at other Taito type X games, I'm gonna try to make that as a separate tutorial, because that adds an extra layer of complexity here. But the reason I say that is because this app wait exe, basically when you launch a game, you'll have to, basically capture this, where you're waiting. So, basically, when you launch a game, you can see here it says, if you have a bat file, then you basically have to identify that, and you'll put in game exe, and then you'll push this little settings button, and then RocketLauncher will basically capture when it should do so when you launch that game. But that's for a separate tutorial. I believe I've accomplished what we have been sought out for. A lot of you guys have asked for this tutorial, and hopefully this doesn't, bring you down here. So, you've got multiple ways: PC launcher, exe in the application path, or you can launch with the TechnoParrot exe, like I did here with the Let's Go Island, and then the parameters are based on your TechnoParrot game folder. So yeah, let me know if you guys have questions. I'm sure you guys will. This is a toughie to set up in general, so good luck, and we'll catch you next time.